Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopilak. My guest today is Alix Schnee. She is the manager at the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. Welcome, Alix. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
And you are here to talk about the next show at the Rockefeller Preserve, which incidentally is my show. So, and tell me, you have a big art background because you...
I do.
Yeah.
I do, oddly enough. My mother was an artist, and not a Sunday artist, but a real artist her entire life. And my husband is an artist, and my son is an artist. So I've actually grown up totally surrounded by art, and it's been a major factor of my life and continues to be. So I feel comfortable talking about you and introducing your audience to who you are. I think you're just a wonderful artist, and I'm not saying that just to say it. You paint from your soul, and I think that people don't really understand art without understanding the person behind it. I mean, you can look at work and go, wow, isn't that great? But I think you in particular, your styles have changed so much. And I think of you as a person who's just immersed in art. Your whole being is art.
Well, thank you. I think if you look at my art through the years, it is the story of my life. It is. It's not, whatever reason I'm painting for, I'm painting myself. And
so how did it begin?
Well,
my husband says he was 6 down in a basement and he first realized he was an artist. When did you develop that
That's
feeling?
an interesting question, because I see it now with my grandchildren that some of them just have to draw all the time and others are totally uninterested, and that was me. I had to draw all the time, whether I was escaping or entertainment or what it was. I was always, maybe it's mind, hand, maybe my hand had to be busy. I was doodling, if nothing else, you know. So
in our earlier conversations, you talked about what it was like you lived, it seems like, in some kind of an isolation.
I did. I lived with my grandmother. My grandfather had died, and we moved in with my grandmother. And it was in the Bronx, at the top of a hill, surrounded by a concrete wall, literally. It was walled. And there was nobody else there, and I was the third child, and there was a developmentally handicapped child, and there was, you know, she eventually died, but so there were 3 of us, and I was the baby, and so I was left alone a lot. Even pictures of me. I have one picture. In fact, I painted it. And so yes, that was my escape. And telling stories, writings, and
it was a way that you entertained yourself through your imagination, or
I guess so, because I was all surrounded by adults, and yeah. And the first day of school, even, this is how I walked with my sister, who was 8 years older than I am, and she walked me to kindergarten. And when I went into the class, turned around and walked all the way home again. I got home, and my mother couldn't even believe I got there, because she didn't know I could do something like that. But I just was I didn't know what to do with children. It was,
so you just left the classroom?
I just left the classroom and walked home. And we're talking city streets in the Bronx, and yeah.
And they didn't stop you? Can you imagine that today?
Yeah.
So what was it like having to sort of fit in all of a sudden with a group of
children? I guess I did. I guess it managed. I was fine. I mean, I made friends, and I was okay. And but.
And in high school, when did this talent of yours really start to?
I think that I was always the one in school that the teacher would say, I need a picture on the wall, will you draw it? Even, I didn't have the chance to go to college when I graduated high school, and I had to go to work. And even at work, when I was working, my boss would say, I need something drawn. And so I think it's an identity you have, but life doesn't always go the way you want to. I mean, I've talked to people who do have a college degree and studied art and don't follow through.
I don't think that has anything to do with being an artist. I think that you can learn better techniques, but I think you're born an artist. Wouldn't you say that? I think it's not a choice in life.
Well, I know. I've always said, I say to my students, it's not a talent, it's a drive and a determination. Because certainly you see artists that are not drawing very realistically, or you know, technique is not really what's important. It's that drive. I mean, Lady Gaga is an artist, so when you think about it, it has nothing. It's just her.
Yeah.
She
Well, my son was like that too. He was drawing immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately, and he was always drawing, and we had to stop him from drawing to eat his food because that's all he would do is draw.
Yeah.
And so seeing a child evolve, I can understand
Right.
what that must have been for my husband, my mother, and now you. But I know that you got married very young.
Yes.
You were a child bride.
I was a child.
and that I remember our talking about the fact that after you had children, I mean, when did you suddenly sort of blossom into or start to evolve into who you are today?
Yeah. Well, I think I've always painted, put the kids to bed, took out the paints, or drawing or something. But then when my youngest child went to preschool and kindergarten, I started to take classes. And the first thing I did was go to an abstract expressionist, realized I hated that, wanted to be a realist, thought I'd be a portrait painter.
So you started with abstract
expression.
expression. I mean, it's usually the other way around.
well-
One starts with realism and evolves into abstract.
But I think at that time everybody was teaching abstract. They weren't teaching realism really in the schools.
Huh.
And so it's almost like religion. I needed something to reject. You know,
Right.
so I rejected abstract expressionism. But you know what? What it did teach me was to approach abstractly. So I don't approach the work in the same way that a realist might, where it's a finished drawing and you're painting it in. I'm a kindergartner, and I'm constantly, like almost like a finger painter, changing all the time. And that's why I'm an oil painter or a pastelist.
But don't you, I mean, I think of my mother. She was like that too. She could draw the most realistic portrait. She hated it. She had to put her spin on it, which would not be realistic.
Right.
It would be something that she wanted to do,
Yeah.
as opposed to the realistic image she was seeing. And,
Right.
and it sounds like what you're saying is that there's an inner drive in you that's your voice as an artist. And so you're slightly changing. You're changing what you see from your lens, so it reflects you.
Right. It was very important to me because what I could do with 3 children, was I would study with different artists in the area. I lived on Long Island at the time, and when I got to the point where my work started to look like the artist, I'd leave, which was probably a detriment because I never really finished anything.
Except that you were learning from them.
I was learning, but I wouldn't go all the way. It was
But
it's interesting you say that.
Yeah.
I was so afraid of losing myself in it that I stayed. I had to keep myself and be different, very different.
But that's you. But I think that's the artist speaking out.
Right. But I think we have discussed this story that I tell about when I decided not to go to classes anymore, and it was this pastel that I did. I was teaching at the time already. And I wasn't taking classes anymore, but I was going to classes where you would sit and work with the model. So there were other people in the class, and I was painting this woman who was Chinese, robe on, beautiful red Chinese robe, and someone walked over. When I went home that night, and I was trying to do learn pattern on pattern, or to find my own voice, and I put a pattern behind her. And I went to the class the next time, and this woman walked over to me, and she said, "Oh, why did you put that wallpaper behind her? I really liked it so much before." And I said, "That's okay. You know, I'm not out to please everybody. It's great that you said that."
Was this woman the teacher or
No.
just another
She was
person in
another
the class?
She was an artist. She was married to a very famous sculptor, actually. And so then I kept painting, and then she came back on the break and said, "I asked everybody in the class, and they agreed with me." And I closed up my pastels and walked out, and that was it.
Now we have an image of that. Could we show it?
Right,
Can we look at it?
Right. But yeah.
And I think it's really, I mean, it's a wonderful image.
Well,
it's a
thank you.
wonderful painting.
Yeah. This is only a detail of it because it's a bigger painting. But the thing is, what's interesting is I did sell it.
You did.
I did sell it.
No matter what they said. Well, and how absurd to put a vote to a work of art.
Well,
I mean, it's the antithesis of what art's supposed to be about.
I think that's when you grow. I think you go to classes. I know many people go to classes for a really long time, and then I think I compare it to a psychiatrist. You go to a psychiatrist and you say, can I leave yet? Can I leave yet? Can I leave yet? And then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, I don't have to ask you anymore. I can leave now. So that's what it is about being in classes too. You know, you need that. You need the
structure of it.
The structure of it, the comments from other people. Are you growing? And then you realize, I don't want that anymore. I want to grow in a way that it doesn't matter what they say. I don't want to know what they say.
Well, I think it sounds too that you basically rejected what people were saying anyway, right? I mean, you have this inner confidence or this inner desire of
don't say confidence.
Okay, that's the wrong word. That's the wrong word. But an inner need to express something that's coming out of you.
Right, right. And if other people like it, isn't that wonderful? If they see something else in it that I don't see, you know, like, you know, and to finish I guess the question was, in 1980 was when I joined a co-op gallery. I had my first solo show, and I felt I needed a body of work. And I think that's another transition. You know, you're painting one, then all of a sudden you want a body, a consistency of...
Yeah, I mean, that has to be an interesting transition when you suddenly develop a body. How did you do that? I mean, how did you come to the point where you could focus enough to develop a body of work? I don't think people realize how difficult that can be.
It was very difficult. Because first of all, the hardest part is the idea.
Right.
And so I looked at myself and I said, well, if I'm going to be really honest, I'm going to paint my life. And what am I doing? And
what were you doing when you developed this body?
I was ready to tell my husband, I'm not painting, I'm not going to iron his shirts anymore. And so I did that. I did my self-portrait in an iron. And I said to my husband, this is the last time you're going to see me and your shirt and an iron in the same place.
Oh, do you have it? We have that image. Let's look at it.
And so that was also a growth for me.
And what about your husband?
No, he's a doll. He's a doll. He said that was okay.
He just accepted. Well, he must have, I mean, he fell in love with you. He fell in love with you. Not who you're supposed to be to the outside world, but who you are.
No, it was really funny because at one time somebody called me, they were doing a survey, and they said, would you tell us the thing you hate most about, you know, anything that you do? And I said, ironing. I was like, but that became what I would embarrassingly at that time call a housewife series. It was the socks at the bottom of the pile that don't match, which we have an image of, and the rumpled bed sheets, clothes thrown around the house. That was my body of work for that show.
I think that's spectacular. My house is still that. I mean, I know, you know, that awful identity of being imposed on you as a woman, that your identity is a spotless house, a floor you can eat off, ironed shirts, you know, socks all neatly arranged in a drawer. I can't think of anything worse. At least spending one's time doing.
Well, you know, I do like a neat house, but I have to tell you, I am very organized, but my studio is also very organized too. But that's part of who I think I am as a person, not because I'm a woman.
Have to do
I think we could have a whole discussion about what we were told as women that we bought. You know?
Or were imposed to do.
Right. And that it was our role, whatever it was, you know, which I think, thank God, that's not the case anymore. It wasn't my generation. So I all that angst, that's another thing that goes into my work, the angst. And so all of that angst was wonderful because I consider my painting minus time. You know, I'm there, I'm painting it. I start with a little something and it grows, and you step back and you go, whoa, that is something. You know, and so there was my angst in that work. And
I remember you telling me that at one point you spent 2 years in a gallery as a portrait artist. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you?
It was horrible.
And why was that so horrible?
I'm sorry. It's not horrible. I should say it. It's very difficult to make someone else's vision of who they think they are. I can tell you, I kept so many stories about that. I remember a grandmother hired me to do her grandchild, and I painted the child, and she came to me, she said, the child has blue eyes. I'm like, she didn't have blue eyes. But okay. okay, you know, or I had one where the parents thought the child was a combination of a couple of actresses, and they wanted me to capture that. And, you know, so, yeah, I love doing faces. You know, I did a whole series of older people in faces.
Right, but the actual portrait.
But having someone stand behind you and say, you know, this is what I want it to look like, or who you're pleasing, is so hard.
It makes me think of Goya, you know, who would paint the official portrait and then go home and paint what he really saw.
Right, exactly. And nobody knew what he was doing with those faces. But the other, I always use this saying from John Singer Sargent, who was a portrait painter, and he would say, he said, on his epitaph, he wanted written, "Here lies John Singer Sargent. You got the mouth wrong," which is.
So what about this series that you then went into of older people? What was that like?
Well, that was a labor of love, really, and I thought, look, I'll never sell these. I just love these people, and I loved going to their homes and talking to them and listening to their stories. Because
how did you get involved in doing that?
I stopped people on the street, or people in my classes, their parents or their grandparents, or it was something that came from inside you that you needed to do. Yeah, I think at the time, if you believe in the mind-body experience, it was something I needed. I needed to hear these women's stories, and they were amazing, what they lived through. A lot of them had lost their husbands, lost children, lived through illnesses, and yet they were so strong. And one woman, this one particular one, I have this pastel, it's called With Dignity. And she was one of my favorite people to visit. She was bent over with arthritis. She couldn't stand up, but she was mowing her lawn one day when I stopped her, and I said, "Can you pose for me, please?"
She was mowing her lawn?
Literally. And she said, "Not today. Come back tomorrow." And I came back the next day, and again and again and again I went back to her, and I did many paintings of her. And at one point I went to visit her, and her daughter had died. And I said to her, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What's that, you know, how do you feel?" And she just looked at me and said, "That's life." And I learned so much from that. Here I am, this is many years later.
How old were you? I mean, what were you, like 50 years difference? I mean,
between her and I, at least. We're talking about 1980. So that's 30 years ago.
You were very young, and you were...
Right, I was. And I was going to experience some illness myself, and I think their strength really helped me.
Wow.
And then after that, you know, after I was finished and I had my surgery and I was done, then I couldn't do them anymore. Then I moved on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you knew that there was something you needed to learn from them, it sounds like.
I guess so, but subconsciously.
You didn't know it consciously.
Right. No, I think that's important in my work. I cannot intellectualize it. Every time I try to intellectualize it, it's a failure.
Well, I think that I would suggest that when artists do that, it's a failure, no matter what.
Okay.
And I know I see it with my husband's work. When he intellectualizes it, it's flat. He's got to get away from that. He's got to get into it where he's lost in the process of the painting.
That's a
then
good way.
It becomes alive.
That's a good way to explain it, if you're lost in the painting. The painting, this is an interesting thing, that takes control.
Right.
The painting takes control.
Right.
And you have no control over it.
Yeah, it becomes itself. But
yeah.
The images of these older women that you painted, I mean, you have a light that comes out at them, which to me is such a positive, because you're also doing something else there. You're looking at them, but you're bathing them in a light of hope.
Hope, yeah, maybe hope, or spirituality, maybe. Or
you're an optimist, you think?
I don't know. One day my daughter described me as Eeyore. You know the one?
Oh, no, I know Eeyore. That's the last thing I would think of you.
I thought that too, so maybe I'm trying to change. I don't know. But no, I don't know if I'm an optimist, but certainly my work, I think, has that light in it. And I strive for that. I want that.
I would say maybe you're an optimist.
Okay.
And so after you did these portraits of these older women, and you said that after you had a transition, you were ill, and then you got better. Mm-hmm. Then what what did you do?
Well,
I mean, I
now-
know your series of
we've got a lot of
work.
time. Yeah, a lot of different time there. But let's just suffice to say that I end up with the landscapes because
When I first met you, just before you were doing your landscape,
right.
I remember going to your studio for the first time. And in fact, if I may say, at that point, you showed me some landscapes, and I thought they were kind of interesting. But there was another series that you had alongside that really caught my imagination. And I think what was so exciting to me about it was that they had an element of atmosphere, which I would think is part of a landscape, but then you combine that with artifacts. And as someone who grew up all over the world, I just was thrilled at what you were doing.
You got it. You really got it. That series, which are framed like altars, and that was 2005 that you came to the studio and you chose the work. Yeah, and that was I called my Rare Dose series, which, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. I think it's Rare Das or something, but
Does it mean something? Is that a word?
It is. It means the wall behind the altar, and to me, all of those backgrounds were they're amorphous, ethereal. They're what do you think they are, whatever you want, but in the foreground is the reality, those are objects from history, and I've sized them for unity, and they're really my prayers for peace. That's what that whole series is about. And so, yeah, it's in a way you could see that it leads into the landscapes, and we should get into them because we only have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, so let's do that.
Yeah.
The show that we're going to have at the Preserve is your landscape series, and it's very exciting, so let's get into that.
Right, and so I think that it's important, this part of it, that people know that even though I am getting an inspiration from a specific place, that they are really almost indeterminate landscapes. So if you look at this one, which I call Light Collides with Quantum Matter.
Boy, that's a heavy title.
Right. But it comes from my sketches. It comes from being in a certain place. In fact, it could even be Rockefeller, the lake at Rockefeller. These could be. And
I love flying into the sun.
Yeah.
Having just come from the recent George O'Keeffe exhibition, which was at the Whitney, and seeing Georgia, she did something which was clouds from a plane, but yours to me are like phenomenal. I just love them. I look at them and I think, again, you're painting from yourself.
Well,
connects to a feeling I have although when you look at them, they could be landscapes, they could be clouds, they could be the tops of mountains.
Well, and it's an interesting one because I'm sitting in a plane, looking out the window, sketching and making all of these different shapes. And it's amazing, the abstract shapes that go when you're flying over it. And I come back to my studio and I say, I have to paint this, and I start, and the painting is green. I'm painting land. And
that just happened?
This was the first thought. Oh, I'll paint the land. And it's just a proof of how the painting takes over. It didn't want to be land. It just didn't want to be. And so I changed the color and then erased the color basically with white and ended up with this white. Is it clouds? Is it ice flows? Is it land? What is it? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I love the contrast between the horizon and the closer shapes of the clouds. I just think it's
right, but I think that it's
phenomenal.
important that it doesn't matter. Is it clouds to you?
Yeah.
That's okay. Is it ice flows to you? That's okay.
Yeah, it's great. Now, some of these others that you have, Red Sky.
Right. I was thankfully, and it was a wonderful experience I had at Acadia National Park, which you know very well because it's Rockefeller did the carriage roads at Acadia, just like the carriage roads at Rockefeller. And I was an artist in residence there in September, and these are from that residency. I painted.
Wow.
It was
what a wonderful thing.
Oh, so fabulous! I just loved it. I really did. And so these two, the Red Sky and the Creek, and again, there's no place in Acadia that you'll find that looks like this, but yes, there are those kinds of places, and so it's my interpretation. The red sky particularly, I was at a sunset every night. I'd have dinner at the sunset, and that color of those sunsets, and I just came back and painted the whole canvas that color.
So it was the color that you saw.
But I never saw a sky, all of the sky like that, but
Right.
I just had to get that color down, and I thought I would change it and make it, grayer. I couldn't change it.
Isn't that
Every
wonderful?
time I would go over it, the painting wouldn't let me change it. And so I just put the land in that I felt, and that was it.
I'm excited about this exhibition. I think that our guests at the Preserve will be excited because we have such amazing landscapes as you go through the Preserve.
Oh, yeah,
And
you have a
this
beautiful place.
nature's peace. I think that as any of us walk through the Preserve, it's constantly changing, the land, the horizon, and your work is bringing out that feeling.
Thank
and
you.
I think it's going to be just a wonderful opportunity for people to see you, and then maybe to go out and go for a walk and see what they experience for themselves.
Around that beautiful lake at Rockefeller. Yeah. Well, this was fun.
It was great. Now everyone knows how fantastic you are.
Well,
even
thank you.
more
Thank you.
about
Well, I hope
you.
they come to the show. It opens this Sunday, actually, at a reception from 2 to 3. It opens on Saturday, the 20th, but the reception is the 20th. If it doesn't snow.
I think it's supposed to snow tomorrow or
we're-
tonight or
yeah.
whatever.
So, but if it snows, then the reception is the week after. And it's going to be there until March 28th.
And so the time of the opening
Is 12 to 3
is
on
12
Sunday.
to 3 this Sunday.
Sunday, right, the
Wonderful.
21st, right.
Well, thank you for showing with us again, Gigi.
Well, thank you for coming and discussing this with me. And thank you for watching.